Welcome you to the set. We talked with JJ, but and we'll let you kick it off, okay? And it's so good to see you. And couldn't be more timely, what with Mr. Gore's speech and everything. And welcome very much to Conversations Manhattan Network again. It's good to see. It's good to see you, like always, you know. And welcome very, very much to Conversation. A pleasure to welcome to the program two Hurtaks. And one on my immediate left is one that the people in my program series will know, J.J. Hurtak, and he's a double Ph.D. He's a social scientist. He's also a remote sensing specialist, and he has a great appreciation for larger spiritual values that can intersect with science, I think, in a seminal way. He's written a number of books. We've done programs with J.J. He's been on Manhattan Network a good deal, and J.J., it's so good to see you again.
It's great always to be here, Harold, and the great audience that you have throughout the world. We know this is a very important point in planetary history and change.
Seems that way to me. But I think, and I'm the far left is Desiree Hurtak, and she's a master's, I guess she's a PhD candidate now, and she's an environmentalist, and she's associated with SUNY, State University of New York at Purchase, and she is an environmentalist, and she's particularly interested, we sit and chatting, in environmental policy issues. And that's really couldn't be hardly more apropos, what with Mr. Gore coming out with his inconvenient truth and so forth. But welcome, Desiree.
Thank you. And it was exciting to see Gore recently at the climate hearing in Washington. Of course, he was defending his position, and there was a lot of interesting facts. Actually, some of the interesting facts were coming from the Republicans who had the opposite side of the picture, and I think that there's a lot of interesting facts also that the Democrats should be presenting as well.
That's really interesting. I wonder, maybe you could kick it off a little bit. We've talked with JJ. You could kick it off, and JJ also has an association with the UN as well, with the ECOSOC and so forth. We'll pick up on that, Jay. Kick it off a little of your own background, please. You're an environmentalist,
right? And I'm specifically looking at public policy because I believe that people really can make a difference. Gore, of course, right now is not a politician, but he's able to walk into Washington and really talk to the environmental committee and try to get his point across, and they're listening, which is exciting. And this is happening actually all over the world, where, especially in Europe, where various groups are coming in to governments and saying, look, this is the data, you got to listen to it. But one of the most exciting things is that there is this intergovernmental panel on climate change connected with the United Nations. And actually, we're both connected with the United Nations, with the World Summit for Sustainable Development and the Committee for Sustainable Development, which brought you the Rio Summit, as well as the Johannesburg.
And Agenda 21.
Yeah, and Agenda 21. And so in 2001, this very international group of people, there's over 100 scientists and 113 countries represented, said in 2001 that global warming was not a major issue, that the Antarctic was getting actually thicker and not thinner. But just recently, in this year, 2007, they totally reversed their opinion. And so this is where all this environmental data is coming forth, is from this very top United Nations panel.
That's really interesting. Could I ask you a couple of things you said? You said your environmental policy, and you said that it's increasingly able to be people that are not governmental, having influence, and there's a difference between power in order to make laws or enforce them and so forth, the governmental systems that exist, and then public intellectuals or intellectuals. Do you think the public intellectuals, maybe NGOs and so forth, are becoming more significant in terms of shaping world public opinion and therefore policy than they have historically? Well, and then the other thing, the panel that you mentioned, that's an important issue.
Yeah.
And then the other issue is, you said intergovernmental agency. Is that all representatives of governmental agencies, or again that question of public intellectuals or freelance intellectuals being able to make an effect on things?
Well, it's this intergovernmental panel on climate change is both scientists, NGOs, and governments working together. And I directly agree with what you say, and this is exactly my point, is that NGOs, and very credible, we're not just talking about Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth, but very credible NGOs are starting to make a difference in government because they're able to do things. Sometimes governments, they can come out with an issue, they can make a law, but oftentimes they can't even implement the law. So they're turning now, especially at the United Nations and at the European Union, to these NGOs who are helping them. And this is a fantastic thing. It's a new thing.
Yeah, that's a development in the epistemology, or in
Exactly.
and also the communications. I would think that it's democratizing or opening up to others, other than NGOs. Even you could have public intellectuals who make a point through, let's say, celebrity status within television or something. They can make a point and have an influence instead of
In
just
the media,
those
yeah.
in the media or in the zeitgeist or in what the
Zeitgeist.
spirit of the age.
Yeah.
You know, they can have an influence in a way that is encouraging if the leaders are out of date with what's needed, and very often leading entities are caught up with outdated systems that are out of date, so they have commitments to that and they're anchored to that. And what's needed is a fundamental change. Sometimes we get revolutions made when the ancient regime is out of touch with what's required in an official capacity. If you understand, that's at a policy level and a political level.
Well, what's
and you study that. You're environmental policy
exactly
issues.
what I'm studying, because in addition to that, what's happening is science is developing so quickly that the governments, they're not scientists. They have to rely on outside experts to give them the information.
And unfortunately, most of our leading politicians have their backgrounds out of legal paradigms and traditions that overlook the fact that we have, for the first time, a tremendous scientific database. And that was the importance of the intergovernmental panel that we have through various disciplines worldwide, more than 113 countries, saying, look, the data is enormous. We must take into consideration now the qualifications of this data for all sectors of society, but we have enough to go forward on the record saying our planet faces some serious time.
And so
over this climate issue specifically, that's what we're talking about.
So this recent panel, which just came out really with their release in February 2000,
change of course.
2007, said that definitely by 90% sure that global warming has to do with man-made chemicals. CO2 mainly in the atmosphere. There's other issues like soot that's coming out and affecting the reflection patterns. A lot of details. And the second point that they made was that, and maybe you want to hold that up.
Yeah, sure. Let me hold this up. And
this is a picture of Katrina. One of the second issues that
they'll come in on this. You talk to it, please.
The second issue that they made is that definitely tropical storms and cyclones are going to be increasing according to the warming of the planet. So that was the two issues that they made. The third issue they're going to make is exactly how much they think ocean levels will rise around the world. So there will be three things that this new panel will come out with in 2007.
How much do the projections of the various experts who understand this stuff vary, or is there a commonality or a reckoning, understanding? Those things you were talking about, a number of interrelated things. Are there wide variations in terms of what projections are made? How high the water will be? Will it be 2 feet? Will it be 30 feet? Or that sort of thing?
This is the most difficult thing to predict, and they haven't come out with a conclusion yet.
Is that enough of this?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
They will be coming out with a concluding statement on that, at least in terms of their own opinions. But when you looked at it, when you look at the entire panel and their discussions from what we understood, China actually was a little bit off-standish. They didn't want to make some of the claims. The U.S., on the other hand, was willing to make more of the claims because even the current President Bush has said, okay, we understand that global warming is really taking place. So it's interesting to see what countries, were responding to which directions of moving ahead with this. But all in all, they signed this panel agreement and then they made it public.
We had signed Kyoto and so forth, and then it gets ignored. But
no, we didn't sign Kyoto, actually. We were the one country, as well as I believe Australia, that did not.
We didn't renew it. I thought we had signed it.
No, we didn't.
We never did sign it.
We never.
Okay, no International Criminal Court or something. And the thing is, we should be a little bit leery, it would seem to me, the intelligence of the intelligence agencies by which inform the governmental process seems to have come a cropper in the case of Iraq seriously and got us into trouble. The intelligence of the intelligence agencies missed the implosion of the Soviet Union. So the way in which the governmental policy system is advised and who they depend upon for information about what's really going on, particularly something so ephemeral as our environmental changes and so forth, where are the most trusted sources for the good information, good science, or good information of a total sense that we can repair to in order to make feasibility studies in a business sense or policy assessments in a public sector sense? where are the major sources for good intelligence that isn't ideologically larded and so forth? In your estimation, you follow environmental policy. Well, I think maybe you could because you're involved, or maybe
yeah, no, both of us.
Yeah, you understand the question.
He's worked quite a bit in the past with NASA, and NASA really is one of the. You know, when you say here's information, where do you go to? What agency do you look for? Governments are only gathering scientific data. They don't have the scientific data.
But there are other agencies, there are other groups that gather information that aren't government. There are other. There's the Academy of Science. There's the, you know, and there's tested peer review things and so on. Is the process by which we get good information to make our policy decisions good, bad, or is it something that we should question at a policy level of understanding the reality?
Well, I think what's exciting is the research that NASA has done because it's actual technological data, and I think we're going to be showing for a minute.
Got another chart? Okay. Let me hold it up and then you talk to it.
Well,
JJ,
Harold,
please.
my background has been also in the discipline known as remote sensing, which is the use of airborne radar and very sophisticated laser systems to look down at situations on planet Earth as well as to measure from outer space. For example, you're holding up what is called the GRACE mission, which means gravity recovery and climate experimentation. This is a twofold system. What you're seeing here on the far left of the screen is one unit that is approximately 310 miles above the surface of the Earth.
Should we show the whole thing? Maybe come back a little bit, fellas, and show the whole chart. Is that what you want?
Right. The second unit on the far
okay, thanks.
right
there you
would
go.
be approximately
okay, hold it there then.
137 miles away from the first unit. Between the two systems working in tandem, they're able to look at the gravity effects on our planet to measure what is called the gravity field of planet Earth, and they can tell by the interrelationship between gravity and mass how much ice is melting, what the various conditions will be in the near future and far future. So we have, as it were, some very, very exotic technology now that is spot on. They can see basically the writing on the side of a baseball from outer space and can make, as it were, very good scoping and scaling evaluation.
And this is, if you think of it historically, it's amazing.
We didn't have this.
And it's amazing that 200,000 years we've been here, and it's all within about the last 20 years or so, that the computer and all of that stuff. It's just the pace of the change of the information, of understanding the reality is increasing exponentially as you and I sit here and talk. There's probably another revolution occurred coming in over the transom this afternoon in every field. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it's been so slow through history. It takes 600 years to invent attack.
If one goes to C-SPAN and reviews the attack, the polemics between Senator Ingram and Al Gore, or one looks at the positions of the senator from Oklahoma and the senator from, Craig, from the West Coast, you realize what is missing in all of this is the role that new science and new technology will play in terms of quantifying the data.
Yeah, and also not larding it all up with ideological special interest things that are tied into institutions coming out of history that may have been transcended in terms of a wider evolution of the zeitgeist.
That's correct.
That's a challenge to humanity. And where are the non-ideologically sources for information that aren't all tangled up with outdated systems that are protecting one economic or political interest against the others and giving us synergistic, resonantly understanding of what we need for the whole system?
I was thinking of Senator Kit Bond and Senator Craig and some of the others that talk so eloquently from their position that we need to bring aboard the question of new technology, but overlooking really the fact that we have, as it were, some very good global measuring assessment tools that are in place that shows a much larger picture of what is happening with all of the oceans warming up in the planet. It's not a local situation.
And those systems can be tested for good accuracy and effective presentation of reality, new realities even.
One of the things one of the things that Grace has shown is actually there's an ocean that goes underneath the Antarctic current, a kind of tide, and they've watched the tide. And if it's warmer, it's breaking up this whole smaller section. That section is called the Western Antarctic that reaches towards South America. This whole area is completely breaking up. In fact, from what Grace is, this is the NASA program, has analyzed 36 cubic miles of ice. And if you can think of what a 36 miles would be, this way, That's how much is breaking up a year.
What? A year?
A year.
Holy Toledo.
And in Greenland, if we can show.
Yeah, sure. Let me put it up for you.
And this is all data. Grace.
I got too many papers here.
Yeah.
Okay, here.
Grace only was launched in 2002. So we only have 2002 data. We have 2005 data. Those were the critical years. And also then 2007, which is just, of course, coming in.
Now, could you explain what this is?
Right.
They got it on focus now.
This is Greenland.
Keep the full page, fellas, please.
This is Greenland, and it shows the early melt in the lighter pink area, and then in the red, how much melted in one particular year. That was 2005, was a very warm year.
That heavy red is what years? 1 year's melting over the norm?
Right. The pink was the 1992. You can see, and there was actually a 2002, which is also a melt that was major. So you see what's left of the Greenland ice sheet, 27 cubic miles, again, this way, is what melts per year in Greenland. So we're talking some major, major melting. In fact, they're looking at, if I can maybe move on to the next picture.
That's enough with this? Okay.
Yeah, let me move to the next one really quickly.
Yeah, sure.
What's happening to the Arctic? This is the North Pole, and you can see 1980 to 2003. They analyze that 9% of the pole disappears every year, and they think by the turn of the century, maybe that would be, 2100, or maybe even before that, there will be no ice.
Wait a minute, 9% a year, you'd be out in 10 years.
Well,
or 11,
well,
12. Well, I understand. Yeah, I understand.
They're looking at what this is all about, and they're thinking that there will be no ice on the North Pole in the summertime before the end of the century. So this would be a major ice melt, and you can see Greenland on the side there as well.
These are projections.
These are projections.
And the remote sensing gives us data, and then we can also put that into modeling, and we got computer. Look how fast we got the genome. They couldn't think it could be possibly done, but the computers came and made it come in 1,000th of the time we thought it would take.
They thought it would take 10 years for the genome, and a business guy says, I can do it. And he did it in 9 months. I always remember that because that's the gestation period of a woman. Of course,
that's right. That sticks in the mind, right? Yeah, these
and
things do.
He did it, and as soon as he started doing it, and they started realizing he was doing it, all the governments...
Vintner? Was it Vintner?
No, Craig Venter.
Venter,
from Irvine. A boy genius who had just marvelous ability to mobilize technology. And in this area of the information revolution, things are accelerating so fast, we must realize
nearly exponential
that we can take advantage of population demographics and curb, as it were, the rush to alarmism by showing that if we plan our technology to work in hand with a new public policy for these critical areas of the planet, then we can move sufficient numbers of people away from the ocean fronts, areas of oceanic dynamics that could be highly destructive.
It's going to take some pretty alarmist kind of perceptions, and they're coming out in alarming regularity now in order to shake the people of the planet, including its policymakers, to do the things that are inconvenient, this special interest, that special, to make a change. Change is really difficult.
Well, the UN
systemic change.
Specialists are sounding more like theologians. Then
how many icebergs can dance on the head of a dialectic interpretation of angels, right?
Right. And it's that situation that now must be seen in terms of a global commons. Is not simply the plaything of those in the ivory tower, nor is it the situation within the closed Senate sessions and congressional meetings of who's better at determining the final outcome of these vast changes.
How is the linking back into public policy between the ivory tower, let's say the academics, or let's just say the intellectual community, as opposed to the policy community? How is it? What's the trends there?
Well, the sad thing is the intellectual community are some of those people that are saying these things aren't happening because they don't have the scientific data. Sometimes they're just too much in their ivory towers. So
they can get so tunnel vision that they don't see the bigger systems relationship.
And they don't stay up, if you listen to even...
Because academia is all divided up into highly specialized little things, and people get very specialized rather than looking in a systems way at the relationship that occurs between parts of that system. Do you think that's correct?
Right. This is why
so we don't have comprehensive overview of
and they're blind to the new data, too.
Ph.D. is...
And blind to the new data,
Ph.D. is permanent head damage.
Permanent head damage? Piled higher and deeper, I've heard some people say, But it's a system. Bucky Fuller, who you all know, I'm really amazed. He was a non-ideologically ordered systems thinker. There were some others,
Roger Revelle, who came up with the first studies on the carbon situation in terms of parts per million. And we have seen that vast increase of
Murray
CO2.
Book. Yeah.
We've seen the devastation of what is being done to the food chain in the ocean, the plankton disruption. I had the opportunity to work many years ago with those working with the ER2 plane, as we see there, doing the
another
overflights
graphic here, folks. Yeah.
of the ozone area of Antarctica.
Yeah.
And we were able to bring about information collection that led to the Montreal Protocol, where CFC, chlorofluorocarbon production, was stopped.
Now that's really a success story, don't you think, that was able to be
showed how a handful of scientists working with the right journalists could bring about a sufficient database.
Because that had been impacting the ozone layer, ozone hole in Antarctica.
When I use the word stopped, I mean...
They're saying it's been stopped, or that it's been
closed. It's been slowed down to an area of what we can say would be within limits. Stop is not the right word. It's more of a modification of a runaway situation where things were getting way out of hand.
And we were able to take a hand in doing something. We used to have these hairsprays and things. We don't have them now?
No.
They took them out.
Now with the CFCs, the chlorofluorocarbons.
But they used to, that used to be the source of it. A lot of, again, man's
Now you have sprays, but they're different technologies.
Well, see, so one of the things is it possible to have the changes so that people, if people say, because we haven't made our peace with technology yet. We have such a capability to shape the environment in a way that's not given, like the creatures do. We can shape it, and we haven't made our peace with the technology or the machine as yet. There are consequences of that, and that pace is just picking up so much, and we can affect the environment. I did my dissertation in geography, sort of environmental studies, but it's man-milieu relationships. You're interested in spatial relationships and the affecting of the world and all that sort of thing. You don't even have those departments anymore because it's so comprehensive. Everything's so specialized. Bucky Fuller, I was just saying, Bucky Fuller, there was Murray Bookchin, there were other people who were thinking systemic, you know, or even, you know, who's the guy with the, anyway, he used to say that that the people who run the world, in a real sense, policy sense, are like pirates. They run the world, and it's always been like the emperors of Rome or the kings and that, they run the world, and he said they consciously set up graduate schools. With their money. They have so much money. They set up, they set up the graduate schools to get the best minds coming up, so specialized out on something, you know, looking at the toe of the elephant, rather than, so that they would never think about the whole elephant and become a threat to those who run the world, because they do think about things in a systemic way. But the academic community, it hasn't been thinking in terms of a comprehensive understanding of the whole process to critique the government the same way that, you know, and even the government gets divided up like that too. So it's a lack of an understanding of an operating manual for Spaceship Earth that we don't have because we don't have a comprehensive vision.
Exactly. Globalization overlooks the pluralistic approach that is necessary, the multidisciplinary approach. And if you have globalization based simply on a Western model that's looking at traditional ethics in terms of the Aristotelian, right or wrong, you fall into this dualistic situation of the haves versus the have-nots. People are not looking at the pluralistic solutions that are going to use spot-on technologies and multiple inputs from teams on the ground from various cultural perspectives, all of which are part of this vast tapestry that is being reorganized.
I think the Vedics have always told us from the beginning there are no academic disciplines in reality. Reality is a seamless web. There are no divisions in the reality. We live in a the Vedics think the consciousness preceded material world. I think the West thinks the materialism or consciousness emerges out of the evolution of material world.
And now we're seeing,
so that's a conflict.
We're seeing now in the global mind both.
And they're converging at this time in terms of, and where are we in terms of the, is it worth talking about? Where is it all leading to? What are the consequences of it? Are we coming to the end of the human society? Are we coming to the end of the whole process of humanity? Are we coming to a new consciousness and universe?
Well, before we get to that
maybe that's
big of an
getting
issue,
too far beyond
well, we can close with that idea, but no, I think it's a good idea because the thing is that economics, as you said, plays a major role. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, Dr. Hurtak and I were involved with a company called TMAC, Technology Marketing Analysis Corporation. We put together these huge symposiums in Los Angeles at the Anaheim Convention Center, one of the big convention centers.
Huge,
And it brought together ARCO, Chevron, all the big oil companies, and what we were doing was showing renewable energy technology. And the reason why these companies were developing this at that period of time was not only the oil crisis, but the federal government gave tax incentives. And when you had tax incentives, you had development. So there is this key tie-in.
When was that when you were doing that?
Back in the 80s, from 83 to 88.
Good for you. You were ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Well, we shouldn't have been ahead of the curve. We should have been in the curve at that point, and the curve should have kept going.
Well, you're having that perception. Those perceptions that are taking those kind of things are not adequately enough able to be taken into the policy decision-making process because it's all larded with all kinds of special interests and commitments to outdated systems of thinking that we should be getting over, but we don't have a leader. We don't have visionary leadership that's giving us the vision that can, put us in a synergistic rendering or understanding of the whole process.
Well, a lot of the wind technology development came out of that, but as soon as the finances, the tax break stopped, so did the technology development. And this is where we really lost a 20-year period. And of course now we need to see more of those tax incentives from government, which I hope is what Gore's trying to do there, because once you start moving into this, look at the Prius car, which is a hybrid. It's a gasoline car, but when you have enough charge and you're running on slow streets, stop and go traffic, it'll move into the electric.
Yeah, I hear that.
It's a great car. I've sat in it.
Well, that's good design.
It's great.
That's good design.
It costs a little bit more. Why can't the government give everyone a $2,000 or $3,000 rebate on cars if they buy it like this? In California, where there is a lot of money, up in Silicon Valley, which is where we're also connected with, you pull into a parking lot and you'll have Priuses all over you. Everyone's gone into it because they're so excited about the technology and they have the money to buy it.
Yeah, right.
You come to New York, and fortunately just now, and I think because we've been talking about this and other people are talking, New Yorkers are the people who should be buying the Priuses because they work on stop-and-go traffic. You would be saving so much money with these cars, and you would actually also have quieter streets because when they're running on slow on electric, there's no sound. You can't even hear they're going.
Well, Hazel Henderson talks about this thing, and so many of those things that are environmental are thought of externalities. They're not linked into the business model that is there and everything. And also the technology's coming almost exponential, like we're saying. And when they were doing that genome thing, they didn't know that, or the computer. The computer, you remember, Turing, or back to, when they started, it was a room this size with vacuum tubes and what you had, and the technology now it's down into a chip.
What's interesting,
and it's going so quickly, and there are things that are there possibly, but that's a new reality that's emerging, and our systems, maybe the whole context of the zeitgeist has changed so that we need a whole qualitative understanding of basic ideas of what is reality in order to get in touch with what the future requires. But it's like birthing. If you're in the womb, you can't see
people have to make the step.
outside the womb.
They have to take the
this
step.
is the whole point, the whole ontology of science.
Thank you.
In reality is changing so fast that we must redefine our values as to what is scientific truth.
Right. Well,
what is the nature of evolution? Where do we go from this point? Is it going to be a quantum change? Or will we see the rise of oceans with the melting of the ice packs at the polar areas, wiping out massive areas of humanity? Do we have the ability to bootstrap a whole new approach, the social, economic, the technical, the philosophical, and spiritual, to see that we are custodians of this great planet, or are we simply out of the game already? These are the enduring questions that must be resolved very, very quickly.
Yeah, right, because it comes down, if in the case of the global warming thing, it is, if you're going to have an ocean rise of 335 feet or something from the melting ice, there's going to be a lot of doo-doo in a whole lot of places where the people live. Like Bangladesh will be underwater, and it's going to have huge consequences. And is it going to be 2 feet higher if things go? Two things. How much do they agree on what the projections are? How clear and accurate are the projections they can make about the consequences? And then the other question is, are we able to do anything? Is the fix in? Is it already gone too far that we're not going to be able to do anything? Or if we do everything now, what could we do? And if we do, what effect is it going to? Is it going to be marginal? Is it going to be serious? These kind of things. Have they got projections of this?
Well,
this
is
your
why that
area of expertise.
The intergovernmental panel is still coming out with how much they think it will rise. We already know that in the 20th century it did rise. It only rose a few inches, and even a few more inches if places that are so low.
Venice is having trouble.
And I want to thank you for saying that, because this is the picture. It's called Mose, M-O-S-E, or like Moses, you can think about it. This is what they might have to build. You know, people say that, oh, it's too expensive to go with hydrogen. It's too expensive to go with another technology. Well, what did it cost for Katrina? One could say, what's it even costing to help preserve the Middle East oil in terms of making it something that's positive for all? And what's it going to cost Venice? This is what they're looking at, to put these huge types of dams that will hold the water level throughout Venice so you don't ruin the whole city. Already people at certain times are walking in almost a half a foot of water, if not a foot of water.
I hope so. Some of those palaces, those palazzi, have you been to Venice?
Oh, I love Venice.
Those palacios are so gorgeous.
I love Venice.
I mean, it's real art.
So this is what it's going to take. This is what they're actually thinking of spending. It's going to be millions, if not ultimately billions of dollars throughout the planet. Why can't they make a change now to help? And this is what they can do. And actually, England is in trouble.
Okay,
Holland,
with this now?
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
England's in trouble. Holland's in trouble.
Yeah, Holland's got the polders.
And I often
stuff.
show this is what Florida could look like if the acceptable, if what people are talking about really would take place.
Those of you who are looking at the screen, note the reddish portion which shows that part of Florida underwater. Now, early in
This is according to which projection and upon which premise and how much raise of the ocean. This would, the premise for building this map or modeling this map would say that water is going to raise 200 feet.
No,
or it's going to raise
even just
something.
20 feet. Even
This
just
is a 20 feet.
20 feet.
If the water level rises of the ocean 20 feet, this is the way Florida would be.
Yeah, unless you.
So there goes Key West and there goes Miami.
Yeah,
in 1981, in the basis of NOAA's studies of ocean dynamics.
NOAA?
N-O-A-A.
NOAA. Like Noah's Ark.
No, well, AA at the end.
Oh, yeah, okay.
National
But
I had
Oceanic
stated
Atmospheric
before
Maybe apropos.
the World Hydrogen Society that we would see along the coastline of Florida the ocean rising approximately 1 meter by the mid part of the 21st century. Now the new information suggests,
yes,
20.
No, but the new
information suggests even a greater increase if indeed there is vast slippage of ice in the polar areas, and that we see a continuation of what we found with the melting of the breaking off of the Larsen ice shelf.
Okay, what can we do? I mean, and are there projections? Do you trust the data? Are you getting widely variegated data as you study this stuff?
Well,
and are there all kinds of projections from the wildest to the most conservative and that?
Well, that's the thing. It could be.
How much can we trust the data?
It could be 6 inches and it could be 30 feet. And
wait a minute. Between 6 inches and 30 feet is a lot of big difference.
Well, and the reason.
What is your best bet as to? Let's suppose we were to say we don't do anything really totally radical, but we do a few things that are able to get through the political process and everything. What do you think? Let's see, what is this year, 2007? Let's say 2020. How high do you think the waters of the world will have risen as you take in all this data you get from different sources? What is your projection of what the possibility is, and upon the basis of what level of public concern had been able to be mustered, do you make that projection?
Let me start off by saying that if we look at the island societies
I should show this, sir.
Well, hold on for
of the South Pacific, it doesn't have to be more than a few inches, and you're going to have a relocation of people from more than 40 nations in the Pacific area.
Okay.
If we're looking at larger areas along the coasts of North and South America and Australia, of course, we're looking at much greater increases that will take place as a result of the massive CO2 being put into the ocean, the changing of the climate, and the possibility that there can be vast slippage of the ice areas in the North and South Pole. Let me explain that.
That would change the amount of water that's being pushed into the ocean.
Right.
So it could go from easily 1 to 3 meters, even more, so ultimately.
But so I was, okay, so the data is mutable.
If we can show
there's different scenarios.
Different areas, and this is the idea that unless you have a multispectral, a multidisciplinary approach looking at specific areas of the world, like you look at different parts of the body, you know, with the human medical technology, you're going to come up with a different situation of topology.
Yes, exactly. We got all the, I've said it, people are bored me saying it, but it's 100 trillion cells in a human organism.
Right.
You got epidermal cells, you got liver cells, and they're all overlaid with DNA, and they all count. Every cell counts, unlike so many human beings are seen to be, you know, in terms of a metaphor with the human condition and everything. But, and it's like a miracle. It works like that, and it's comprehensive, and we may need something like that. It might even go also into how much capital formation are we going to have, and how are we going to distribute the wealth that is able to be created? What is the model? Are we going to go with the same economic model that we have now?
We can't.
Where it's all out of past savings that all goes to a few very wealthy people who set the template for everybody
The macroeconomic
else?
structure.
Are we going to come to a liberating or a different, like the computer? If you sat there 100 years ago and you said you're going to have a computer, you would be called crazy. So what are the things that we can see? If we see it comprehensively, don't we need to have a new design of the political process? Don't we have to have a design of the economic process and economic capital formation, distribution, that kind of thing? Are any of those things taken into account, or are we just going to keep lumbering away with the same old economic assumptions, political process that we have now? Or do we see any changes at that level so that the amount of capital formation could really let us do what we know we're collectively able to do when we're limited now because it won't fit into a business model?
I was just at the United Nations yesterday where we were speaking about the change of the macroeconomic structure for the small developing nations, the island nations that are going to see the environmental impact from one area and the socioeconomic impact from the other. They have fragile infrastructures, and the increase of the environmental pressures will be tremendous. There may be a wipeout of some parts of the world. So we get into situations where we have to pull back and say, wait a minute, we are futurists. We believe that humanity is going to survive, even if some of us have to live underwater. But we have to pull back
live underwater.
Possibly some of our situations along the coastlines that will be under the assault of vast changes already in process.
Yes.
Water world.
Look at, of course, New Orleans, Louisiana. People don't even know where to rebuild. And, you know, a lot of those places were not really poor houses. You see the poor houses that were inundated. But if you look at really the whole map of New Orleans, a lot of very wealthy people were hit also with that rising tide. And then you have areas like Cancun and Cozumel. And of course, this is Mexico.
Cancun was hit by the
by Wilma, which also came across and hit Florida.
Okay, yeah.
You know, you don't hear about it, but the entire island had massive damage, and all these huge hotels that were in Cancun had at least a foot or two of water in their base. And some of them actually went even as much as 6 feet up.
But then that goes away in the normal flow. It's like a wave coming,
but you know
and then
what
it
happens
goes
when
away.
a water comes in? You have to actually restructure the whole bottom of the building. Do you want to be in a building on the 20th floor when there was 6 feet of water in their basement for a long period of time? No, you have to fix all these things. People aren't counting the cost. Look at Bangladesh. That's one of the
They're called externalities to the business model.
But see, it shouldn't be.
Absolutely,
that's where
that
the
should be
problem is coming
factored into the macroeconomic understanding. And then also, if you have your house like that, and let's suppose you've got a portfolio worth about, let's say, just roughly $500 million, it doesn't matter a hell of a lot to you. The house is gone. It's too bad we lost Grandma's picture, but you can just very easily go somewhere else. But people that are disadvantaged at the lower end of the economic, and that's about 90% of the world population.
It's hitting people because insurance companies are not going back in. And when you can't get insurance and your house is $1 million, you sell that house. And your house, and the market starts dropping. And this is what's happening, and it is hitting. And this is one of the problems with nuclear energy. You can say nuclear energy, when they're producing it, is cheap, but you're not counting where you have to take it across the country to Washington State to dump it. You're not counting about all the other kind of costs that are involved. So you have to see the larger picture, and this is where the macroeconomic structure has got to come in.
I think so, and they got to have a thing. I think they need a new model upon a new reality. I don't want to go into it because it's my thing.
If we just look at the economics, $132 billion just in terms of the offshore oil processes, $155 billion in terms of trading and shipping, dealing with the ocean routes. All of these situations are up for grabs, and this is going to require fine attunement. This is why we need to have social scientists. We need to have those involved with a reciprocity of science and the humanities in the foreground with a new generation of political leaders throughout the world who are going to redefine the global commons and say that we all have to take responsibility. Otherwise, we're up against globalization doing us in as a world civilization.
Well, globalization's growing apace now.
What I call the unholy trinity of competition, acquisition, consumption.
Spell it out again. What'd you say?
The unholy trinity of competition, acquisition, and consumption.
Well, I don't quite understand. How does all that work?
Rapid increase of the consumer market to the point that we're simply taking, rather than replenishing basically the baseline of renewable resources.
Okay, well, we got about 20% of the world seems to be pretty well served by the system in place now that's evolved out of history. Maybe 20% they live in upper middle class conditions, that sort of thing. I don't know, at least half the population is living on less than $2 a day or something in terms of it is. Can't do a hell of a lot with $2 a day. There are women in Africa wondering which of their 2 babies they're going to let starve to death because there's not enough food. When we know the system collectively is able to feed everybody, we have a system, we've got a system of capability of providing life support and ecologically appropriate conditioning. We have a capability that our systems inherited do not allow us to do because it is inconvenient to the established the institutions that we've inherited, legitimately, whether the International Monetary Fund, the system, the nation state even, the thinking that we do. We have a system that's out of date with what the future requires.
But given what we've done in the last 30 years in terms of the scientific quantum changes, we have a brilliant, intelligent group of thinkers and doers on this planet. If science can be seen as more of a human-oriented process rather than an object-oriented process where everybody is an economic unit, then we can make a shift that's necessary.
We need Martin Buber's I and thou again.
We need the Martin Buber, we need Roger Revelle, we need people at the top who can see spaceship Earth
but we don't have
that.
Repair. We don't have that. We don't have those people. And they don't have an influence, they don't have a thing. And then they will all just, so the economic model stays the same. And it's also based always on a zero-sum thing. If I'm going to benefit, or you, citizen C, is going to benefit, citizen D has to lose, or something. Right. They're all thought upon the idea that there is not enough. And we have to take and get for ourselves and take care of our own and so forth. And that's a model that may be disastrous to what the planet requires.
And that's why
we don't have the visionary leadership.
But we're the Academy for Future Science. That's our organization.
Oh, well, maybe the Academy for Future Science could put some models out.
That science has a way. I mean, places in the Sahara should all be running off of solar energy. It's not that expensive. If you would fund it, if the UN would fund it, if the World Bank would fund it, these things could all be possible, and then they could be caught up to where we are.
But they would say you can't do that within the economic model and compete with oil or with petroleum. You can't do that. The photovoltaics, the economics aren't there. Maybe they'll get there, but if they get there without some sort of government subsidy, if they get there, then the market will do it.
Well,
so why the market isn't doing it?
So it's not just technology in a sense, and we agree with that. It's also consciousness. People have to start changing consciousness. They have to see the seriousness of what is before them if they don't change consciousness. If we keep with the CO2s, with the petroleum-based products going into the atmosphere, these things are causing havoc all over the world.
Okay, suppose I talked to a fellow the other day and he said, well, we can do mass transportation and something. I tell that to a 16-year-old where you got an automobile. Do you ever remember when you first got your first 16, you're 16, you got a car? Freedom. You had freedom. Or let's say just an increasing living standard. Do we all want to go back and live in a cave? Do we all want to have only a 10-watt light bulb? How much is going to have to be taken away in order for us not to have the benefits of the technological capability to produce comforts and even some? And is it possible to have a thing where people are not going to have to lose? Are you going to have a design capability where the light is still going to be there, but do you understand? Well, so can you have zero-sum solutions? Is it possible now in a way that it hasn't been historically? If it is, why? What's different than out of the historical model of acquisition and so forth? And when did that happen? And why did that happen? And what are the implications to public policy and public understanding of the reality?
Technology is evolving. If some of you people had bought those old light bulbs when they said they were cooler and they were better for the environment 10 years ago, and you put them in and you said, I can't even see my own face in there, things have changed. The new light bulbs are better. Go out and get them. So technology has changed. One of the other things that's changed, as I mentioned, the Prius.
You didn't show this. Is important.
No, we'll show it later.
Show it later. Here's something we're going to show.
The Prius, of course, mostly this is a Toyota car. A lot of the hybrid cars came out of Japan. One of the things that's going on now is Honda has developed a hydrogen car, which is really tremendous. It's working with companies such as Shell Oil. It's working with the state of California, and what this is you take natural gas, which is actually abundant in the U.S. especially, and you transfer that to hydrogen, and you run your car on hydrogen, which is a very simple system, and you not only run your car, but you run your house on the same system. Now, hydrogen itself technically is not a fuel. You need to break it down, and then it becomes like a storage capacity that energizes things. So it's an excellent source. You need something, you need a catalyst to do this. Solar is a catalyst for this. It can be used. Water is a process that can be used. And we believe ultimately that hydrogen can be used throughout all cars, all homes, broken down from solar energy. It's a very simple technology. I'll show you how basic it can be, because we're also members of the Hydrogen Energy Society. This is all it takes, a little solar fuel.
With the solar energy coming in, the conversion takes place, and you have, presto, your energy source.
And people are thinking that these things can be so miniaturized that every wheel of your car can actually have something that looks like this. So you don't have this big, massive engine. You're actually running your car on each wheel with a small converter system. There's just different ways of
converting what to what?
Well,
sunlight.
Water usually through sunlight, or through even a compressed energy from natural gas to hydrogen, and running your car off of hydrogen.
And what the thing is, you want to get away from fossil fuels, burning fossil fuels, because that's contributing to the pollution of the environment and so forth. What about sequestration and methods by which, say, coal and so forth, the carbon or something could be captured? Could we do that as an ecological addendum and still be able to use some of the systems during a bridge-over period?
Well, they've looked
you got a lot of industry involved in that and so forth, a lot of investment and that kind of thing.
You might need to do that, but technically California, of course, has done some preliminary work, we'll say, on hydrogen. They're looking at setting up what they call the hydrogen highway, where you have gas stations throughout California, so you can actually just, if you have the ability to fill it up at your house from natural gas, which is really very clean, then you can...
Well, that's still got to be got around.
Yeah, no, and then you go into the gas stations. The gas stations also have natural gas, and you go in and you fill your car up with hydrogen right where you need it. And ultimately, of course, it should be a closed system where your own car can produce the hydrogen itself. But there's technology and there's advancements. Once you start it, it starts moving, like the light bulb. The early light bulbs were not good. The current light bulbs are much better. Once you buy them and you start using them, there's a market. There's the scientific advancement. If you don't buy it, it doesn't work. One of the things that BMW is coming out with is called a flex fuel car. You can run it on gas or you can run it on hydrogen. And they have flex fuel cars down in Brazil, and it's a choice between alcohol or biomass, which is from the sugar canes, where you convert it to pure alcohol, or gas. So one day, if you want to buy gasoline today because you happen to be at that gas station or the prices are good, you put your car, come in and you fill your car up and you get gas. The next day you're driving down the street, you see a great alcohol price, you go in and you fill it up. These are the technologies that are available.
Let the market work. Let the market work.
We just need to move into it.
What about the grid? We got an electric grid, and we got that, and we got sources of coal for that, and we got a lot of coal burning in China now for electricity. Electricity is the grid, or are these things being able to be local, or can we still need the grid? And are we going to feed it? And whatever happened to, I remember as I was growing up, right along with the atomic bomb, remember the atomic bomb came? And they said, all right, kiddies, everybody, when they drop the atomic bomb, duck and cover and get under your desk. But they had that, they always had the promise of the scientific part of the nuclear thing, that when we reach
critical mass.
Fusion, there will be no energy problem.
Yeah.
There will be endless fusion, non-polluting fusion, and that it was always a promise that that was going to happen. We had these people, cold fusion or ponds or something like that.
Right.
Is there anything
Stanley
in that
ponds,
Martin
Fleischmann.
Is there anything in that where we'll have the energy supply will be adequate to supply all the needs using electricity? I think we need some advances in battery technology.
Exactly.
But what about the idea?
Well, the futurists in the 1990s suggested that there would be nuclear fusion by 2025. That might be
Well, they used to project
too
that
quick
from
for
about
many.
1975 to about 10 years ago.
Again, we're working with a sliding scale.
Why are they not making progress
We're getting
along
close.
that thing?
We are
We are
getting
making
close.
progress. We're
Yeah.
making tremendous
But
progress.
they did. No, JJ, in 1950 they were projecting nuclear fusion by about 1975. We will have solved the energy problem. And has that just gone away? What's happened to the promise of nuclear fusion as a clean source of energy that could supply and use the grid and provide electricity?
Scientists throughout the world, the Hot Fusion Society is still working. They're still doing research. They are actually getting close. They have some levels of the technology down. They can't harness it completely. So
why?
It's still
I mean, do you happen to know what the problem is? Could we send some young kids over to help them solve it? Or why is it? It's been a long time coming.
Right. There's certain types of magnetic fields that have to be controlled in these reactors, and then they have to be able to stabilize it for a period of time. And they're getting closer. And believe me, all this stuff is adding up to really massive great technology that will save the planet, but I don't think we can wait. That's the big thing. You know, they're telling us to wait. The Atomic Energy Society saying
we can't
wait.
put all our eggs in one strategy.
They told us that we would have that. In 1950, they told us we'd have it by about 1975. This is now 2007. Right. What happened to that?
I say don't wait. Let's move
on.
No,
but what happened to that promise that they told us?
Well,
What's going to happen to the promise you're giving us now? What's the difference between the promise they gave us and what you're giving us?
It's the same thing as maybe as the genetic research.
Okay.
Because they said it would take 10 years to solve the genome problem, and the inventor came along and did it in 9 months, and all of a sudden all these government contracts all over the world also did it in 9 months. They said 10 years. Why? They knew they had 10 years of funding for that thing, and they didn't.
That's tied up to the outdated paradigm, macroeconomic paradigm.
So maybe.
And it's all a business model, and that's outdated, and the limited capital formation is there. We don't have a system in place. It's like an Anjant regime running the system based on, and we've only crossed that line where we could destroy the species with our weapon systems about 1970. Fuller, among others, projected we had crossed an ontologic line existentially significant, that there were more haves than have-nots in terms of our abstract technological capability of providing life support within an ecological context in the year 1970. Well, and we're still limping along with outdated institutions and assumptions about the structure of human society, including its political and economic thinking and systems in place, public policy.
Harold, we're seeing a technological slide towards self-destruction if we do not get the upper hand on our priorities, recognize that we have an information revolution. We can download whole libraries of information to people in the third world, the developing nations. We can do a rapid catch-up. We've got tremendous power to tap into. The point is we must take it out of the political debate. Those who think they have all of the answers, we must see this as a pluralistic situation, a multidiscipline, specialist, futurist, social scientist, people on the ground that are going to be able to bootstrap from the variety of positions and approaches that must be brought together.
The political and the economic, the multinational corporations, the large corporations who run everything, and they're all one system. You can't divide those two things up.
That's the problem.
And then you got them, and then they're going to say, you still like to eat? You still like to be able to get around? What are you going to do? Have us live in a cave? And are you going to have to go, you're going to have to do away with all of our technological advances that we brought, and there's been a lot, or are we transcending scarcity? Is there a new reality so we can bring the folks in and involve a thing, because the political context is one you're going to have an explosion. You're going to have an explosion politically.
Well, that's why
you have to deal with these inherited institutions in some way.
Hot fusion is too big of a technology for a small company, a small entrepreneur to pick up, which is why it is mostly through government research or large university research. So it's a very slow technology, which is what has,
Is it deliberately being kept slow by some interest in the environmental community? The environmental community doesn't want it because they don't trust it. The environmental community wants people not to have abundance. They want them to be living in a cave and living with nature.
To the contrary,
the environmental community getting in the way of progress that technology could evolve.
The environmental community would be very happy to have hot fusion come about because it's actually not as dangerous as the contemporary fission technology that many countries want to use.
Yeah, Lovelock even is for plain old nuclear fission now. It's going, and they get 70% of the energy in France comes from atomic energy. And you got all these public utility-based public citizens who put a kibosh on that because they're all caught up with how that's bad. That's technology. There are people who think that we are a force for evil in the universe. We have technology. We have the ability to do that. We're evil. The world would be better off if it was just we weren't here.
But there are some
They've got that anti-technological bias.
There are some new models of fusion, not the hot fusion, big hot fusion, but there's some tabletop models that have been generated by even the University of California that actually if an entrepreneur who has sufficient funding could get behind this, or some significant companies could get behind this, I believe we can develop even a fusion model.
Is there anything to the cold fusion or not? Or is that
yes, sir. I've talked directly to Bonds.
That's huge if that were to happen.
And we're part of the incorporation of the Electrofusion Society back in the 1990s.
You belong you're all over the place,
we're very
you guys.
What happened is the whole situation of going into cold fusion was so complex to the average person, of pitting the chemist against the physicist, and the position of the energy department was that this doesn't work. You have something on the level of 8 different levels of energy transformation that are necessary. So goodbye, don't talk to me.
It's cold.
What happened is the cold fusion people moved to France. They were supported by the Japanese, and we have a lot of work going on behind the scenes in more than 8 different countries that is very, very important, valuable for the 21st century. What I want to point out to our audience, again, with your great arguments, Harold, is that we live in a very dynamic way of reaching out through the audience, through this television program and others like it, and through streaming of information worldwide. We can
and it's on YouTube. It's on YouTube. It can be seen by everybody in the world. And that accelerator is just about to go up at CERN. So there's going to be maybe a new development in quantum mechanics and also in string theory, and string theory connotes different levels of consciousness or different layers of dimensions of reality. And you guys have been involved. We haven't hardly been able to get into it because we've been so grounded in the material.
In 1973, I wrote this book called The Keys of Enoch, the Book of Knowledge, which is a primer for quantum changes that will take place. And I pointed out at that time that with the changes in the polar areas, some 43 times 6 to 10 to the 15th ton torque mile of ice could be released with melting.
Like a haiku,
with melting, and as a result, the whole shell of the Earth could be unstable briefly. We could see massive wiping out of populations near the polar areas, but nonetheless, humanity will survive, and that's the bottom line in this discussion.
That's a question.
We have the opportunity to recognize in the footprints of history, as we did at the South Pole.
Okay, we only got about 2 minutes left.
Okay.
So
under the ice
this
there.
Is you. This is JJ.
This is one of our teams at the South Pole.
One of your teams. Were you there?
I wasn't personally at this site.
Were you there, Desiree?
No. It's
Would you want to go?
2 members of the Academy for Future Science were there, took this picture, that under the ice pack at the South Pole, we found tropical vegetation. We found the evidence that the whole shell of the Earth had changed, had shifted.
Things have changed over the longer haul.
And that the footprint of evolution goes on, that we are in a very dynamic, user-friendly, but also a universe that is friendly to heaven and Earth coming together.
Well, that's perhaps true, although I think 99.9% of the species that ever existed in the evolution since the beginning of time have gone. And we're at a point where we could, I was talking with a very knowledgeable fellow, and he said there's probably systems out there in the universe, they get to a point where they got such a capability to get into a new relationship to cosmos, growing out of the materialistic thing, and then what they do is they just self-destruct. And we have a capability to destroy our species now, and we have a capability of liberating it.
If anthropology
and
ecology come together, a new humanity is emerging, an anthropo-ecological being that's going to reclaim his and her place in the universe.
Well, it may be.
And we may have friends in outer space that may help the solution by giving us information we need.
Do you believe that? I don't know. I listened to Mr. Carl Sagan, still looking with Sete, and I don't see anything.
Well, I think it's really up to us right now to make a difference, and we really have the opportunity.
coming out of the condition that we're in.
And even if there are other intelligence, they're looking to see what we're going to do with this planet. Are we the caretakers? Even the Bible says we were the caretakers of the animals and the trees. What are we doing with this? They say it's a very serious question.
And not just only on the level of justice, but it has to be a systems involving of everyone like that, 100 trillion cells in a human organism, in order to get a resonancy that'll inter-accommodate us to a new level of consciousness in universe as we transcend 200,000 years of human experience.
And you can't point the finger.
We may be at that point. We're going to leave the womb.
And don't point the finger at someone else. Don't
no,
say
there's nowhere to point any
We all have a role in this. We all can play a role. And
well, you guys are really helping to fill a very important role by providing all this good information. I'm glad we could get some of it down on television.
Look to Bucky Fuller, not to Carl Sagan, with respect to evolution going on in the cosmos. And check us out on our website, futurescience.org, and we'll show you a plethora of information dealing with even Operation Disclosure, which is to bring to the foreground of public discussion the reports of cosmonauts, astronauts, government people who know behind the scenes that there are other evolutionary systems in the universe.
We better run the graphics, please, because we want to make sure they get their website up on the thing. And thanks a lot for coming.
Keep smiling, Ad Astra, look to the stars and realize you are part of a cosmic citizenship.
I guess we all are part of a system. It goes back 13.7, and that accelerator is going to go. It's just about ready to fire.
It's telling us more about the universe, more about our lives.
They're going to have a telescope within 2011. They're going to have a telescope that's going to take a picture of the Big Bang within 1 second of the Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago.
Maybe we'll see our own face looking at it.
We're really taking the measure, the consciousness taking the measure of the environment, and we're about to, if we're going to succeed, if we don't destroy ourselves, we're going to have a liberated order and a new relationship to cosmos.
My book said 14 billion years ago, the whole evolutionary spark.
13.7, I think.
Yeah.
And with the modifications, we're going to look at some updates. We're going to see that we are not alone in the cosmos, that we are indeed part of a vast system of universal intelligence.
Perhaps we are. We don't. Okay.
Universalis.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, thanks a lot. I don't quite know why we haven't run the graphics, but I think we're out or something now, and so we can stop talking. We're out. The time is gone. So thanks a lot very much.
Stay well.
Yeah, but they won't be on the air.
A smile in your heart as you look to the cosmos and reclaim your citizenship.
Yeah. Okay.